you're playing to bet the river for value, unless the other guy bets, and then all of a sudden you fold. Here we are again with our people.
Hey people.
Hello people, it's Wednesday.
So I got this friend, Tom Hand, and Tom is actually a professional tennis coach at the collegiate level.
Oh, okay.
But his real love is poker.
All right.
And one day he says to me, Lee Jones, here's what's true.
That sounds good.
When they go passive, aggressive, it's the nuts every time. So he said, okay, here's an example. Let's say that you raise before the flop and your opponent calls out of the big blind. And the flop is like a king, queen, deuce.
Okay.
And he checks and you bet and he calls.
Right.
The turn is whatever. And he checks and you bet and he calls.
Right.
And now the river is a seeming total blank.
Right.
And suddenly he bets 2/3 of the pot.
Just out of nowhere. Just
Out of
dumps.
nowhere.
Yeah.
Completely from the wild blue
After-
yonder.
Tom Hand says this is it.
Tom Hand says, whatever it is,
Right.
it's beating your ace king.
And oh yeah, that's what we have here.
Yeah, sure. We have top
So
pair.
we have ace king, flops king, queen, deuce.
Yeah. Two
They-
bricks run out.
They check, we bet, they call. They check, we bet, they call. Now they come up betting strong.
And yeah. And
And you're saying that means they either have king, queen, or a set of deuces?
a set of deuces or
Yeah.
whatever it
Okay,
is,
right.
somehow
It beats ace king.
It's beating ace king,
Right.
yeah. And I think there's two reasons that we see that. One is they want to keep you on the hook. They want to be deceptive.
Right.
So they check call and they check call.
You're very sneaky, you know that?
How'd you do that?
Suddenly they get to the river and they go, oh, this is my last chance to collect.
They're afraid you're going to check behind.
Yeah, they're afraid you're
Yeah.
going to check behind. So
Right.
out comes the big bet. The other reason I think it happens is because sometimes they're afraid of a bad card coming. And they essentially want to wait until they get a safe run out.
Right. So they're waiting to see if a jack or a 10 or a flush comes
Or an ace or whatever.
Oh,
you
yeah,
know,
an ace,
right?
right, yeah,
you know,
yeah.
I mean, there's
Yeah.
certain cards that they're worried about. So I think they want to basically get
Right.
a safe run out before they commit big money to the pot.
The coast is clear, fellas. They've gone.
So the Tom Hand rule is if the opponent is passive on two streets and then all of a sudden just gets really happy about their hand, it's big.
Oftentimes when I hear people describing situations where they're facing a big bet, they're saying, well, you know, something didn't make sense.
God, really?
And so maybe I need to call here because his you know, his line didn't make sense.
Oh, that's for bluff catching.
Right, for bluff
Yeah,
catching,
gotcha.
right? It makes sense to him. It makes sense in his world, at least maybe not having pre-planned it.
Well, that, you know, it's a great lesson here in trying to get inside the mind of the opponent. Because with a lot of people, it is going to be true that if the story just doesn't make sense, it means that they decided late in the hand to bluff. And so
Right.
they're not telling a consistent story
Right.
with what happened before, and it doesn't make sense. This is another case where they're kind of not telling a consistent story, in that they're showing not much, and all of a sudden showing something. But in this case, you have to kind of know your person. With a lot of people, that it's going to be just like what you said, where it's like that shows enormous strength.
Another version of that you see is when they have the betting lead.
So is this like a corollary?
Oh, you know, it's the Tom Hand rule.
Okay.
Still happening.
Oh,
right?
it's a
You know,
form of passivity that's
It's a
that's
form of
not
passivity.
checking.
It's small bet sizes.
I see.
Right.
Okay.
And so there's
Gotcha.
50 in the pot, and they bet 10 or 15.
Right.
And you're like, okay, I call.
Yeah.
You know, and then they bet 15 or 20 on the turn, and you're like, well, okay.
Right.
And now suddenly they bet 55 on the river.
if we're looking at this like, okay, so we have that information, what ranges do we need where that makes a difference? I'm thinking of just like basically one pair hands. In situations where you might normally have a kind of a testy decision with one pair, when you're up against this pattern, I think what you're saying is...
I think almost any one pair hand.
Even over pair or ace king top pair.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you know, you and I have actually talked about the idea that big bets on late streets are usually the truth.
Right. Yes.
And this is kind of an additional bit of information that sometimes you get.
Well, this is an important one because it's a situation where we can get lulled in by the passivity. And so if we have a story in our head, we got the ace king, and it comes king queen deuce, and they check, we bet, they call. In my mind, I'm thinking, okay, I got this guy torched.
I'm good, yeah.
He's got king jack, he's got queen jack, I'm just gonna get some money here.
Right.
Next card comes, I check, he bets, he call, the story's still the same story.
Right.
I'm getting ready to, how much am I gonna bet the river, right? And now, this is what makes, poker hard, is that you have to just completely rewrite the story in a second as soon as you get new information that doesn't fit with what came before. Really what we're talking about is times when you can get off for one pair.
Yes.
Which is one of the most important things. It kind of goes along with our very first video, value betting the river. It's like how you play one pair on the river is so vital about getting value out of it when you have the best hand and somehow figuring out how to fold when you're beat.
Going to your reciprocality thing, this is a classic situation where if we can get value on the river with our good one pair hands, and get away when they're not good, that is a line that a lot of people just don't find the correct side of.
Right.
And so if we can do that, it can be hugely valuable.
Like the default could simply be, okay, you got your top pair, top kicker, you're playing to bet the river for value, unless the other guy bets, and then all of a sudden you fold.
And that also means that you're thinking about that on the turn.
Right, you got to plan that in advance.
That you are thinking, okay, I'm putting out my turn bet, whatever it is.
Right.
And then when the river comes, if he checks, I'm going to bet X. And if he bets, I'm probably going to fold. I'm not going to freeze up. I'm not going to throw my ace king face up on the table, anything like that. It's just going to be like, okay, that was path B of this hand. And there go my cards. And
the beautiful part about that, and this is going to be a recurring theme, is that when you have made that plan, not only does it allow you to do everything in tempo, but it allows you to actually make the fold. Because if you haven't made any kind of plan at all, the typical thing that happens is bet the turn, guy calls, and let's say he bets out on the river, or you bet and get check raised, same kind of thing. All of a sudden you're facing this big strength.
Right.
If you didn't anticipate that at all, then that's the moment when we go into the fog. And not think completely clearly.
Right.
And talk ourselves into calling,
call without even thinking.
Yeah, just like boom, or bemoaning our bad luck, and all the mental noise that gets in the way of optimal play could be eliminated if you truly, truly have made a plan before the river card even comes.
If you have the betting lead for 2 or 3 streets and you get to the river and suddenly your opponent, who's been passive the whole way, suddenly wakes up with a big bet, your default should be to fold.
I'm Tom Hand and I approve this video. I learned to play this game from Lee Jones, and of all the books on my shelf, Tommy's Elements of Poker is an absolute go-to. These guys know what they're talking about. You should subscribe. It is a massive plus EV move. If you don't know what that means, you should definitely subscribe.